So today I want to go back to an old favorite, the Aroma De Cuba, which is made by my father, but for Ashton. These are the cigars that I kind of got introduced to my father with. So my father is very interesting. Pepin Garcia and his son Jaime kind of, are the leaders and master blenders and everything. But Pepin's interesting that he doesn't come from just this legacy of, my great-grandfather was in Cuba. Pepin was a master roller in Cuba until I want to say the 80s or the early 90s.
Oh, wow.
And then he left. So he's a direct, he was in that world for most of his life. And then I want to say, started in Miami, making whatever he was making. I think some of the original Pepins, were coming around. But what really set him off was his partnership with Pete when Pete started Tatuaje. And then it was after that, I was in the industry when the first My Father was released, so it had to be 2011, 2012, maybe 2010.
They're that young?
2009. When the first My Father, name brand, the name of My Father.
Okay.
But, Tatuaje has been around since 04.
Okay.
Something like that. And so maybe Pepin was in the States rolling maybe a couple of years before that, maybe late 90s,
so would
early
you say
2000s.
Tatuaje kind of inspired Pepin to do My Father?
I don't know if it inspired. I think it helped put Pepin on the map to where when he released the original My Father and the La Bijou, it was a bigger deal because people knew of him. You got to remember the impact that Tatuaje has had on the industry. They were really the first ones to, I think they took some influence from things like the, original CAO, the Nashville era CAO, but they really took it to this whole level, and everyone from Nick Melillo to John Huber will say that, without Pete, so many of these other companies, just wouldn't be here. How Drew Estate eventually became, what it became, a lot of that was due to Illusione, Black Label Trading Company, definitely, very, very much in the same vein. But, these kind of cool, modern, these limited releases that have this cool story to tell, that are very thematic. You can say he was one of the originators of the modern, boutique movement. There was always cigars that were considered boutique, in the 90s during the boom. Alec Bradley, Rocky Patel, these were considered boutique.
Yeah.
Even Fuente to a degree. But the effect that Tatuaje has had, not just on people who, were inspired by him, but, making My Father from a well-respected but relatively unknown, Pepin, again, was respected within the industry of people who knew him, but also this is there was internet, but it wasn't as big. There wasn't, there was a couple of forums. Steve Saka actually used to be big on the forums back in the day. But it was through the prevalence of Tatuaje, people smoking these amazing cigars, that put My Father really on the map. And I want to talk about My Father today because they just made a really interesting announcement that they've opened a facility in Honduras.
How many facilities do they have now? Two.
But it shows you these kind of trends that happen. So when I was in the industry, when I first started, Dominican was everything. And then there was some Honduran, but the Honduran was kind of viewed, I don't want to say lower, but the highly rated stuff was all Fuente. It was really big. La Flor, Dominicana was kind of coming out. Nicaragua was kind of seen as the underdogs, the cool hip guys were in Nicaragua. And then Honduras was seen as a lot of general stuff was made in Honduras, some of Rocky's early stuff. And then this trend started really moving to Nicaragua, where the past 4 or 5 years, Nicaraguan imports have outpaced Dominican and Honduran by a pretty sizable margin. And then you see guys like Ernesto Perez Carrillo start using a lot of Nicaraguan tobacco. Fuente building a brand new factory that I think opens this year in Nicaragua because of the versatility of the Nicaraguan soil, the abundance, and all this stuff. You could get so many different kinds of tobacco, the flavor profile. So Nicaragua actually was where a lot of these Cuban expats, when they were kind of either thrown out or when they left after the embargo and they wanted to restart this industry, a lot of them went to Nicaragua originally. But then there was the Sandinistas and the things going on in the 70s. Fuente's factory was burned down. They had to leave. I think the first Padron factory, they had to leave. There was a lot of them left because of political instability. There was also an embargo on Nicaragua for a while there in the 70s, maybe in the 80s. So everyone went to the DR, was much more stable. And that's where that kind of coincided with the early days of the boom in the late 80s, cigars. Wall Street was kind of becoming this thing. Then, as the situation in Nicaragua kind of settled, companies started getting more and more of their tobacco from Nicaragua. And then, I don't know if this is directly correlated. It might be. During the boom when it was, they couldn't keep up with demand, these big Dominican companies, they had to start getting tobacco that they weren't kind of growing themselves, which is you see, like the Oliva Tobacco Company, and these guys start chucking and jiving and selling a lot of tobacco. And then it was kind of new millennium, you really start seeing this move to Nicaragua with, Padron was already there, but Padron starts becoming more prominent. Aficionado releases the first top 25 list in 0405, somewhere around there, and Padron is very highly rated. So you start seeing this move to Nicaragua. Now, I don't want to say Nicaragua is saturated, but there's a lot of guys in Nicaragua. A lot of the cigars are coming out of Nicaragua. But you're starting to see almost like a similar, again, I don't want to call it boutique movement, and it's not like they're newer guys because they've been there for a while. But you start to see, companies like Aladino, and CLE's making a little more of a mark these days, coming out of kind of reclaiming the Honduras of the 90s and early 2000s when, all the, Hoyo de Monterrey and Punch and Villazon was based out of there, and the early Camacho days before it was bought by Davidoff. You're starting to see Honduras kind of reclaim some of this glory. And, Ernesto Perez Carrillo makes one of his new Essence lines in Honduras. One of my favorite factories to work with is Flor de Copan, which is one of the AUSA factories. Yeah. They're out of Honduras. The Camacho factory in Honduras is one of the most state-of-the-art in the world. So you're starting to see this, and when you look at the kind of growing region of Honduras, you think of it as it's this entirely separate country. It is not far from, where they're growing tobacco in Nicaragua. It's a couple of hours. Mm-hmm. It's really not that bad. So you're getting a lot of the similarities and the versatility that you see in Nicaragua. You can get that in Honduras. So you're starting to see very softly, but my father opening up a facility in Honduras. And now listen, it might just be an overflow facility where they can send some more of their tobacco and get. Who's calling me? Why is Warren calling me? Oh, he probably doesn't have his key card. Sucks for him. But it might just be an overflow facility where they're going to it's still the regular tobacco that they're growing in Nicaragua, but they can roll more.
Because it's the same climate, right?
It's very similar. I mean, listen, the soil is everything. Soil is always going to make a difference, which is why, Yalapa, Esteli, Condega, Ometepe, they're all in a vicinity, and they all produce vastly, very different soils and tobaccos.
So I know there's certain cigars in Nicaragua that are grown, on side of volcanoes in the Jalapa Valley region. When you went to Honduras, to Flor de Copan, and the Camacho factory.
Greg went to Flor de Copan, I went to Camacho factory.
You went to Camacho factory, okay. So for Camacho factory, where is it? Is it surrounded by mountains? Is it on a mountain? Is it, where is it, I guess?
To the naked eye, it looked very similar to when I was in Nicaragua. I will say the difference, time of year also plays a role. I was in Honduras in the middle of March last year, and it was the dry season. So, there was a lot of brown, except, and this shows, the ingenuity and the kind of the facilities of Davidoff. Everything around them was brown except for their plants. Their tobacco plants were green as can be. They have their irrigation down even during the dry season to make sure everything is well watered. But let me see if I can pull up a map here. So one of the biggest growing regions in Nicaragua is Condega. From Condega in Nicaragua to the Camacho factory is an hour and 40 minutes.
Well, that's not bad at all.
You know what I mean? To Yalapa looks like it's even closer. Well, it's 2 hours because you have to. Distance-wise, it's closer, but because of the road situation.
Yeah.
But 2 hours to Yalapa. Let's see Esteli. 2.5 hours. So within 3 hours, like you have, like it's not like it's not like the DR where it's like there's an ocean and it's very, very different. You're getting very similar climate. I mean, imagine it's like the climate you get in, Massachusetts to, like New Jersey. Even that, like the climate you get in like Albany to like New Jersey. Very, very similar.
Yeah.
But the soils, because of the volcanic activity in Nicaragua, you're going to get these different kinds of soils. But overall, and it's also easier production-wise. You have your Honduran factory over there. It's growing your Honduran tobacco. But you need boxes sent in between. You need material sent in between. You need fillers sent in between. It's 2.5 hours. You can just drive a truck and easy to get it back and forth. So I kind of like this. I like how the industry always finds a way to, somebody makes the first move and tries to maintain relevancy, doesn't want to be stagnant. So my father, even if it's just an overflow facility where they're just going to roll some stuff, but doing that in Honduras and or Fuente building a factory in Nicaragua, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a company and a family more intertwined with the country they're in than Fuente. Fuente is Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
Most of their blends are almost all Dominican, with some exceptions. Like they really originated Dominican wrapper. Like for them to build, and not just like a holding facility, a full-on beautiful factory in Nicaragua, it's a big deal. And my father building a facility in Honduras, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see, are we going to be getting more My Father releases? Are we going to be seeing more collaborations? Maybe they have more capacity now. Maybe it's easier for them to do a private label or something with Crown Heads or something with this guy, because don't forget, they do Las Calaveras with Crown Heads every year. Now they're doing all the Wise Man for Foundation is all My Father. They're doing all the Tatuajes, obviously. They're doing La Aroma de Cuba and what is the other one? I'm blanking on it. La Aroma de Cuba. They do 2 for Ashton. It's La Aroma de Cuba and...
It's not Avo, right?
No, I'll write it down. Give me a second here. Cut this part out until I find it. Oh, San Cristobal. That was it.
Okay.
So they do both
They all
of
have
those.
similar style and bands and all
Yeah,
that.
well, actually, so La Aroma de Cuba, it's always been an Ashton brand, at least to my knowledge. Used to be made by Fuente for Ashton.
Oh, okay.
Because they had this great partnership. Like Fuente makes all the Ashton name brands, VSG, the Symmetry, etc. But I think that Fuente has been really focused on, just kind of maintaining what they have, and so again, the switch over to My Father doing this was, 15 years ago. It's been a while, but I always liked the original La Aroma de Cuba that My Father did for them with the red footband, Connecticut broadleaf, and I remember, I don't know what these go for today. I'd have to check. I haven't bought a box in a while. In my store days, these were $5.50.
Wow.
Yeah, they were under $7. Now again, that was a while ago, but even back then you could see the bargain on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Our humidor is a little bit dry right now.
Yeah, so this is cracking a little bit, but that's due to the dry more
I'm
so
loving
than
the
anything
taste
else.
of it. I'm not even sure if I've really had this one.
So they're still like on this one website, $180 for a box of 25.
Oh, that's great.
$7.20 a cigar, so they really haven't gone
That's
out
not
that
bad.
much. For an Ashton-owned product made by Pepin Garcia, $7, pretty good.
Yeah, that's
good.
not bad at all. So do you think with them moving to Honduras, are they going to move production over from, move production of like Foundation or My
I-
Father.
I think that might. I think what the movie. I don't know what the ultimate goal is. What I would assume is that what they're doing with this is mostly like it's going to be extra storage, and it's going to be extra rollers. I don't know if they're building a factory there so they can start making Honduran cigars. I think that it might just be, well, listen, we've taken on, Foundation's growing. We're, we need more capacity. Mm-hmm. We're leaving money on the table. We have all these requests to do projects, and we have the tobacco, but we just don't have the capacity to like roll it all. So I think at least at first it might just be more of a facility to like, they'll send their same tobacco over there, stored over there. Like maybe all of the Crown Heads and Foundation stuff is rolled in the Hunt. I don't know, but maybe it's all rolled there, and then only Tatuaje and My Father is rolled.
Yeah.
Like who knows? But it is interesting. Like, are they going to be establishing fields in Honduras? Why did instead of making another facility in Nicaragua, is it cheaper to do it in Honduras? Maybe it was cheaper.
Yeah,
Maybe they got some kind of tax. And I would assume so. But who knows? But it's an interesting move. But yeah, La Aroma de Cuba, always a great. I think this has gotten on the the Cigar Aficionado, like the budget, like best value cigars. I mean, that list used to be cigars under $5. I think they must have raised that at this point. I don't know what they still. I don't even know if they still do that list anymore.
I think it's always good to have a list like that out there.
Yeah, but the fact that this is like, again, due to our own issues, like very dry and like cracking, but still like you could still see the ash construction. The pull is still very good. It still actually tastes very good. But yeah, this is like a rock. Well, not like a rock. It's just at the line of smokable.
Yeah, as it burns more, it softens up.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting to see. Like I said, I've started to notice this Honduran trend, and I've started to notice, reviews of things made out of Honduras are getting better and better. Aladino is probably like the best example of that. Like Aladino
that was one of my favorite cigars I tried last year.
Aladino is doing really good things. And that's the same family. That's the Aroa family. That's Christian's brother. It's his brother and his dad, I believe.
Yeah, that was a really good cigar.
Yeah, I like they do. Again, there's all these stories of this and that of who originated what with who. The story that I've always heard is that the original Corojo seed from Cuba, like the Oroa family, like owns, like that's their thing. Like they kind of originated growing Corojo outside of Cuba, and now you see companies, like Aganorsa, for example. And I would say that Aganorsa probably disputes this, and they have their own story, and who knows? They both make great cigars, so I don't care. But Aganorsa is so well known for their Nicaraguan Corojo and like that sweetness that it has and everything. So like Honduras has played an important part, and I'm glad to see them getting their flowers a little bit more, growing. And I'll admit, I was not a big Honduran fan for a while. Every couple of years, your palate starts to shift. And when mine shifted kind of right as I was leaving the store and coming over to the corporate side, that's when I got more into Nicaraguan, more into like complex and nuanced and these things. And a lot of the Hondurans I was smoking at the time were like these old Villazon, like these big broadleaf, heavy, rich, decadent, what Steve mimicked the Mi Querida Black on. Okay. Like he mimicked that cigar on these famous like 80s and 90s Hoyos and I can't remember his first name, but one of the Padron brothers was working for General like STG at the time, like in Honduras. Like he was doing all that, the punches and everything that was coming out of Honduras at that time. But now I find that my palate has kind of shifted again, and they're shifting. Honduras is catching up to what the rest of the world is doing, so they're growing these kind of different strains. They're probably fermenting a little bit differently. Like the Henry Clay Warhawk made of Flor de Copan is, I think, one of Altadis's best cigars in the past decade, and that's using Honduran tobaccos in there. So it's very interesting to see when you see these kind of shifts, and then you're also seeing a little bit more love going back into the DR these days, like Hostos Fernandez at Tabacalera La Isla. We're doing I'm not going to say it yet, but we're doing a really big project with them that's coming out, sometime this summer. And he's doing wonderful work in the DR.
Is there what am I trying to say? Is there another country that is still creating tobacco that might not be as popular now that you see within the next few years that might
it's tough
a trend that we might see? The more there are some cigars, like I said, I wish I could you write about so many cigars and all that. You see so many different components in different cigars, but I've seen Cameroon, I've seen Indonesia. Is there there's a popularity with Connecticut broadleaf so much that there's not a lot of it. People are kind of not, shifting gears instead of using Connecticut broadleaf. One company that comes to mind is Dunbarton, where I feel like they utilize a lot of Connecticut broadleaf, and they might be shifting elsewhere because the lack of it. But do you see any other countries that might, since you're seeing a trend in, Honduras becoming one of these top countries to produce tobacco and cigars, is there anything like in your mind, and this is strictly like opinion based, or if you've seen a trend?
So you're already starting to see countries growing their own version of broadleaf. Nicaragua and Honduras are both growing their own version of that now,
yes.
As is Pennsylvania. And you'll see, Aroma Crafts redid the Cro-Magnon with Pennsylvania broadleaf. Alec Bradley released the double broadleaf a year or two ago that was Honduran broadleaf. I think AJ has been experimenting with Nicaraguan broadleaf. In terms of countries where I think there's like going to be an industry growing around it and like factories, no. Just because of how it's set up right now, the kind of logistics of where everything is just makes it...
Okay, well then do you see more of a popularity? Like, do you see
in terms of tobacco?
Yeah, but like, do you see like more people utilizing Cameroon or things that were not real, like Brazil? Like,
I would say Brazil, Mexico,
Yeah.
the U.S. I would say that the U.S. can see... Pennsylvania could really start adding to it. Maybe Florida. To be honest, I'm not the largest fan of the tobacco coming out of Florida right now, but that's a palate thing. Cameroon is tough because it's Cameroon. It's tough to maintain that. It's tough to get the tobacco in and out. There's only one family who kind of can control that, and that's why you don't see a lot of Cameroon out there. But I would say Mexico, a lot of people using San Andreas, and then you have guys like Nick who are working on different versions of Mexican wrapper. Like in the Olmec, he had, the kind of typical Maduro San Andreas, but then also like a Clado version, a more natural version. So I think Mexico is poised to do some.
Up there, honestly.
Ecuador had some weather problems past couple of years, so that's an issue.
Like I keep saying, I see a lot of. I've been just writing a lot more lately, and I just see a lot of cigars that we may use for Cigar of the Month, or if we do reviews. Ecuador seems to kind of always be a focal point in a lot of these cigars.
Ecuador is perfect for wrapper because it has natural cloud cover.
Yeah, I think Ecuador, Connecticut is probably one of my favorite tobaccos to use for a wrapper.
Yeah,
I don't know. It just
Have you ever? When was the last time you had regular Connecticut shade? So like the Monte Cristo White Vintage was that.
It has been a minute.
I'll have to get you because it is very. You got to taste them. The
different,
Ecuadorian Connecticut wrapper that you see on the regular Monte White, like these kind of typical cigars.
Because Connecticut shade is also is a little darker.
It's a little darker. It's got a little more
than any regular Connecticut wrapper.
It's got a little more flavor, which sometimes you want, sometimes you don't.
The Warhawk is that Ecuador?
That's Ecuador,
yeah. The Warhawk's one of my favorites, but you could definitely tell a difference between Connecticut shade and an Ecuadorian Connecticut.
I think the Monte Cristo Classic might use regular Connecticut shade. I have to look.
Yeah.
But you can tell the difference visually. Like it's definitely, it's not a darker brown like a Habano or a Sumatra or anything like that.
It's like a dirty blonde. I hate
it's like a dirty blonde. Yeah. Whereas the Ecuadorian is like definitely much lighter.
Yeah.
Definitely much lighter. But no, I see Pennsylvania. You know, I was always a little apprehensive with Pennsylvania broadleaf. I felt like it was a little bit too strong and too bitter.
Where's it grown in Pennsylvania though? Like
Pennsylvania.
No, but what parts? What part? It's not like grown in Philly, you know? Like
No,
where's it?
I think out by Amish country in like Lancaster,
That's what I
because
was
my aunt
thinking,
went
yeah.
to Amish country to like go food shopping because they'd have all, you know, whatever German foods that they're making out there. And she was like, oh, they were talking about that they grow this cigar tobacco. I'm like, yeah. After seeing it on the Roma Craft, I'm like, I can see it now. Like, I
Yeah.
can see how this could be utilized. Now, I think there will be guys, namely like Nick and Steve, who will continue using just Connecticut broadleaf. As the demand for Connecticut broadleaf goes down a little bit, because you have these kind of other variations that companies will go to, I think you're going to, like, Nick is way too tied into Connecticut to, like, I don't think he'll ever use a
Yeah.
Honduran broadleaf or a
Yeah.
Pennsylvania broadleaf. He's just way too tied into his home state. Mm-hmm. Steve, too. I think Steve is just very, you know, he's a New Hampshire guy.
Yeah.
Or a New England guy. Is he New Hampshire? I think he is New Hampshire.
Who?
Steve Saka. Yeah, I think he lives in
New
Hampshire.
England, yeah.
So I think they're both like these kind of traditionalists in their mind of like the history and everything. So I think that they're going to stay with Connecticut broadleaf, but these other companies, you know, a Crown Heads, an HVC, a My Father, utilizing these other countries. Now, I don't know if you're going to see like a giant spike elsewhere, but I think the future lies Pennsylvania, maybe even the Carolinas. I mean, the climate's a little bit different for cigar tobacco. Because notice, the best cigar tobacco in America comes from where you don't think that like tobacco would grow, you know, in New England.
Yeah.
Whereas typical tobacco growing country, the Carolinas, Virginia, you know, I think that might be more well suited for cigarette and other
Yes,
kinds.
yeah.
But who knows? You know,
Yeah.
you play around with some stuff and who knows what you got. But it's going to be interesting. It's a good question. It's going to be interesting. Cameroon, I think, is you get what you kind of get. Mm-hmm. Notice that like Roma Craft did Cameroon with the Baca and all that. It's been very limited. I haven't seen it around a lot. You know, it's tough, man. Cameroon tobacco, it's not the most stable of environments. The weather isn't tremendous. I mean, if you want to know about Cameroon, look at the interview on Joe Rogan with Francis Ngannou and the hell that he had to fight through, which is why he's the awesome monster of a fighter that he is. He worked in salt mines when he was like 9.
Shit.
So it's tough in Cameroon. And then I think they're going to continue to explore the rest of Nicaragua. I mean, Ometepe has become a unique thing of the past couple of years. I asked Placencia, the Placencia team was here doing a training a few weeks ago, and I'm like, this is going to be a stupid question. I'm like, I'm guessing you guys just like use boats to like go get it. And like, yeah, actually no one's ever asked us that before. But yeah, we have to like, they use barges because it's literally an island in the middle of the lake.
Yeah.
They use barges to go get.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to continue to explore seed varietals in their main growing countries, but countries that I think have something. Costa Rica to a degree, maybe Peru. Like you'll see some stuff. Brazil, I think, has some potential. I mean, you've seen a lot of Davidoff. You've seen CAO. You've seen Trinidad using stuff out of Brazil. La Flor Dominicana. I remember. I think their Chapter 1 had like a really dark Brazilian wrapper.
You know what would be interesting, really quickly before we wrap up? What are your thoughts on if they were to grow tobacco in like Hawaii?
I think it might be too tropical.
Too tropical?
Because if you notice, nothing's really growing in the Pacific. Like Sumatra, but that's more like the Indian. Like nothing really is coming out of the Pacific.
Do you think that's why? Because like for your opinion is that Florida tobacco doesn't really hit you. Do you think it's because it's too humid
it's the
and
same
hot,
with like when you see like a lot of Indonesian. Like it's just very unique. It's very unique.
Yeah.
Like you can't throw that kind of tobacco in like a typical blend. Like it really stands out.
Yeah.
Now it can offer you some really unique experiences, like the Southern Draw Cedrus, which I said is one of the most unique cigars on the market. Uses Indonesian tobacco, and it gives you like that kind of pine tree, very floral. So I think there's like viability for some special projects.
Yeah, not sustainability.
But you gotta also think, and I just think this way a lot because of how my past year has been. Logistics. It's not going from just Indonesia to America. It's got to go from Indonesia through the Panama Canal
Yeah.
to Nicaragua, Honduras, or DR to actually get rolled and
Yeah.
tested. It's a lot of
Because
squeeze for the juice.
A question I get a lot is from friends or family, like if it originates in Nicaragua but it has like a Dominican tobacco in it, how did that happen? It's like, well, yeah, there might be a Dominican seed being transported to Nicaragua to grow. A lot of people don't.
Or it's just fully grown in Dominican and then they just you know. So you have companies like a perfect example is the Oliva Tobacco Company, not related to Oliva Cigars.
Yeah.
Oliva Tobacco is a tobacco broker. Like, you know, a lot of these people don't know. A lot of these factories don't have like fields of their own. Mm-hmm. Or you look at somebody like Steve Saka. He goes to Naxa or he goes to Hoya de Nicaragua, and he wants to make a blend, but he has to like buy the tobacco himself. Like they don't front him that. He has to go get it. So he has to go to somebody who has tobacco. So some of the bigger tobacco brokers, Oliva Tobacco might be the biggest, and again, they're not attached. I went to their facility in Nicaragua. It was actually very, very cool. They had like Israeli irrigation experts to install this like state-of-the-art system, and the guy's like, who better to like find you water where there's no water than like Israeli irrigation experts. But then Plasencia and Aganorsa, very, very big. You'd be surprised the amount of like Aganorsa tobacco and Plasencia tobacco that's in other company stuff. And you see it when you go to the factory. Like I'm not going to say which factory, but I was at a factory the past couple of years where there was like a big, like wrapped bin, like of tobacco that was aging. And it said Aganorsa on it. Like it was Corojo from Aganorsa. So all these companies are, there's only a few that have the big infrastructure to supply everyone else. There are some people who are almost completely independent. Perdomo does all his own stuff.
Yeah.
The only thing he buys is Ecuador and Connecticut, which he probably buys from Oliva. AJ probably does a lot of his own stuff because he does a lot of Nicaraguan puros. Think of it this way: if they're a Nicaraguan-based company, anything that is in their cigar that's not from Nicaragua, they're buying from somebody else. My father doesn't have fields in the DR that he grows and sends them. He's got to go to somebody who sells Dominican tobacco and he buys it. He buys it like that. So anytime that somebody's based in a place, but that's why you see, with the exception of Ecuador and Connecticut, all of Perdomo's stuff is mostly Nicaraguan puros, almost all of it. He makes his own cellophane in his factory. He makes his own boxes. He likes to be 100% self-reliant. But it's interesting. It's good questions. I don't think a lot of people ask these kind of questions.
Yeah,
but,
it's just,
Yeah, there's a whole. I don't want. I'm using this term. It's not meant to be bad. There's a whole like underworld, and when I mean that, like not like shady, but I mean like there's a whole network and system of how this works that a lot like they see. Oh, my father's cigar. My father grew all this tobacco. Most likely, no.
Yeah.
And especially like I know plenty of factories that like they're big factories. They don't own any fields. Now they might have a family who owns a field that they're like a direct partner with. Nobody really owns the fields in Connecticut. Like no cigar company owns those fields. Like they're kind of independent families, but Altadis has a relationship with this company going back 50 years, or Drew Estate and this company, like where they do the barn smoker, they go back all this time, or Now, what's interesting with Nick is Nick has relationships in Connecticut where like he can experiment himself with stuff.
Yeah,
there,
that's
which is
key,
really interesting. But yeah, they have their the bigger companies have their fields. Like we went to Camacho's field in Honduras. I'm sure my father has some fields. Padron probably has some fields. But a lot of the stuff that they get, they're buying and trading, and sometimes it might be trade. Hey, I need this wrapper and you have it, but you need this filler that I grow. Let's change it up.
Let's work out a deal.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Very interesting. But so a little throwback to my one of my old favorites, Aroma De Cuba. The ones that you will buy will be better than the ones that we unfortunately had a little dried out, but they are fantastic at a really great price point. Nice Connecticut broadleaf Maduro on them. Thank you everyone very much for watching. We should have an interview next week with our dear friend Sean Williams from Cohiba, so that'll be fun as always. But thank you very much for watching. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. And as always, keep it lit.